Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most dynamic, demanding, and honestly, utterly fascinating roles out there on the open ocean. We're talking about the second officer in the Merchant Navy. You know, if you think of a modern commercial ship as a giant floating city, the second officer is, well, they're essentially the ultimate Swiss Army knife that holds that multi-million-dollar asset together. From steering the vessel through some seriously treacherous waters to literally saving lives in a medical emergency, they really do it all.
Okay, let's dive into this because the stakes of this job are absolutely massive. As our source material points out, a single missed update on a chart or a minor miscalculation can have catastrophic consequences. We aren't just talking about a dented bumper here, we're talking about massive environmental disasters, lost cargo, and most importantly, the safety of the entire crew. The pressure? It is on from the absolute second they step aboard.
So, to understand this role, we're going to look at the 6 distinct hats of a second officer. 1. The Master of Navigation. 2. The Midnight Bridge Watchkeeper. 3. Medical and Equipment Custodian. 4. Cargo and Port Operations. 5. Record Keeper and Mentor. And finally, number 6, Risks, Rewards, and Salary.
Let's start with Section 1, the Master of Navigation. So while the captain, or the master of the ship, holds the ultimate responsibility for the vessel, it's actually the second officer who is physically drawing the voyage's roadmap. Under the captain's supervision, they are the ship's primary navigator, and the process they use to plot that course is incredibly rigorous. Step 1 involves route planning using both traditional paper charts and modern ECDIS, which, by the way, stands for Electronic Chart Display and Information System, basically planning the exact route from port to port. Step 2 requires deep hazard checks, calculating exact distances and analyzing weather patterns to dodge storms. But Step 3? Step 3 is probably the most critical, updating the charts based on notices to mariners. Because out at sea, navigation is only safe if it's perfectly current. If there's a new wreck or a shifted buoy, that has to be accounted for immediately, no exceptions.
But, even as the master of the map, their deck duties don't just stop there. The second officer also steps in to assist the chief officer in several really crucial physical areas around the ship. They help oversee vessel security, they conduct structural inspections to ensure the integrity of the hull, and they assist with the general maintenance of the deck department. So they're constantly moving, constantly checking.
Moving on to Section 2, the Midnight Bridge Watchkeeper.
There's the solitary vigilance to this part of the job that really defines the life of a mariner. Second officers traditionally keep what's known in the Merchant Navy as the 12 to 4 watch, meaning they're on the bridge from noon to 4 p.m. and then again from midnight to 4 a.m. Just think about that midnight watch for a second. While the rest of the ship is fast asleep, the second officer is entirely responsible for the safe transit of this massive vessel. They're monitoring the AR per radar system, maintaining a strict visual lookout, and making sure the ship flawlessly adheres to the COLRGs. Those are the international regulations for preventing collisions at sea. It's just them, the pitch-black ocean, and a whole lot of very heavy responsibility.
Now, during their daytime watch, they also handle a super vital piece of administration, the ship's noon log. Every single day, the second officer has to calculate the day's total run, the ship's average speed, and the propeller slip. And this isn't just busy work, right? This data gets transmitted directly back to company stakeholders on shore, who use the second officer's exact math to monitor the vessel's overall fuel efficiency. Their calculations literally impact the company's bottom line.
All right, Section 3, Medical and Equipment Custodian.
Now, what's really interesting about this next set of responsibilities is that you might naturally assume a ship has a dedicated doctor, right? But in the Merchant Navy, the second officer often steps right into those shoes. They have to hold a valid medical care certificate. If there's an injury or an illness on board, they are the absolute first point of contact for treatment. They're administering first aid, doling out medication, and they often have to consult with shoreside doctors via radio while bobbing in the middle of the ocean. Beyond active care, they're essentially running the ship's hospital. They maintain the medical log, ensure oxygen cylinders and defibrillators are fully functional, and manage the medical locker, meticulously checking that not a single drug has expired.
And just as they're the custodian of the crew's health, they're also the custodian of the bridge's highly technical equipment. They are solely responsible for testing the GMDSS, that's the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System, just to ensure the ship can actually call for help in an emergency, and they prepare all the monthly radio traffic reports. On top of that, they're constantly checking the gyro and magnetic compasses for errors to make sure the ship is genuinely heading where the computer screens say it is, all while simultaneously recording weather data from the meteorological instruments. It's a lot to juggle.
Section 4, Cargo and Port Operations.
So, what happens when this giant floating city finally reaches land? Well, there's a pretty dramatic shift in duties here. At sea, the second officer is focused almost entirely on navigation and watchkeeping. But at port, navigation pauses. The charts are put away and the cargo operations begin. The second officer jumps right in to assist the chief officer in monitoring the loading or discharging of the cargo. And that could be millions of barrels of oil, thousands of shipping containers, or just massive piles of bulk goods. At the exact same time, they're assisting in the intake or discharge of ballast water, which is absolutely critical to keeping the ship stable as its weight distribution radically changes during loading.
And let me tell you, the port duties are highly physical too. During arrival and departure, you'll usually find the second officer at the aft, the very rear of the ship, managing these massive, incredibly heavy mooring lines to ensure the vessel is safely tied to the pier. They also maintain port watches to ensure security while docked. And, fun fact, if they happen to be working on specialized gas carriers, they take on yet another hat, understudying the gas engineer to assist with complex cargo plant operations and maintenance.
Which brings us to Section 5, Record Keeper and Mentor.
Because, as it turns out, keeping the ship running isn't just about steering and heavy lifting, it's about meticulous organization. The administrative burden on the second officer is frankly staggering. They're responsible for taking inventory and preparing requisitions for a huge variety of ship supplies. We're talking about everything from the general library and onboard stationery to the actual catering supplies for the crew. They have to rigorously maintain records for gas detection equipment, update flag state circular files, keep the safety management system manuals current, and ensure all safety data sheets for the chemicals and paints used across the ship are perfectly filed. It is an exhaustive list that requires incredible attention to detail.
But perhaps their most rewarding duty is acting as a mentor. The second officer is the direct mentor to the ship's deck cadets. And because they were in those exact trainees' shoes just a few years prior, they're perfectly positioned to pass down the practical realities of seamanship. They're teaching the next generation everything from traditional knot tying all the way to the nuances of advanced electronic navigation. They're quite literally shaping the future of the maritime industry right there on board.
Finally, Section 6, Risks, Rewards, and Salary. So, the crucial point is, with all this navigation, the medical emergencies, the cargo loading, and the cadet training, how does the industry actually compensate this level of expertise and hard work? Well, salaries vary based on experience and vessel type, of course. But generally, a second officer on dry bulk ships, like your standard bulk carriers or container ships, will earn somewhere between $4,000 and $4,800 a month. However, those working on specialized tanker vessels, the ones handling oil, chemicals, or liquid gas, they take on significantly more risk and specialized duties, and they absolutely see a premium for it, pulling in between $4,500 and $6,500 monthly.
But, beyond the money, many in the Merchant Navy consider the second officer to be the absolute sweet spot rank. Why? Well, you finally shed the trainee tag of a cadet. You have real significant responsibilities. Yet you don't quite have the crushing administrative burden of the chief officer, nor do you carry the ultimate, heavy legal liability of the captain. It's widely viewed as the rank where a sailor truly learns and masters the art of the sea.
It is a role of intense pressure, precise detail, and tremendous reward. By mastering the many hats of the second officer, you are definitively proving your worth on the ocean. But it does leave us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder. Once you've mastered the navigation, the cargo, and the medical care, are you ready to take that next step and shoulder the ultimate legal weight of the captain's chair? That is what every second officer has to eventually decide. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.